Okay, so yes, very warm welcome to halfway, and I would just be curious about um, yeah, how is it that you are doing? So what have you maybe noticed in the last 5 days or so, and has something changed, especially? So maybe you can just write in the chat. What have you noticed? Can be during meditation, can be in your day-to-day life. Especially the way you relate to things, the way you relate to your thoughts, the way you relate to your breath, maybe the way you relate to other people. What have you noticed about the way that you relate to people? And has something changed, or maybe nothing has changed? That's completely fine also. More frequent returns out of thought, being able to spot a thought earlier. Wow, amazing. This is really a key thing, to be able to spot earlier the thoughts. So often we think that meditation is about stopping our thoughts or something, but actually our thoughts are part of the nature of our body and mind. Just like we eat, just like we sleep, just like we get tired, just like we get excited, just like there's a feeling of standing. Thoughts are the natural part of being human. And so not that we're trying to be without thought, but we're just trying to notice thought. And sometimes when you start to notice thoughts, you can notice them earlier. And when we notice our thoughts earlier, we are not as caught in their story. So typically, if there's more awareness, we just believe our thinking, and it goes on and gone. And then maybe already when it's very deep into that story, do we realize, oh, maybe actually the story is not so helpful. So just being able to spot that thought, the train of thought earlier, especially the unhelpful ones in your life, can really help transform the way you relate to these things. And something further on that, so reflecting, I don't have to do anything about thoughts, just let them carry on, note them and focus on your breath and body. Exactly. So it's not we need to control our thinking, we don't need to push them away. You don't actually have to do anything. It's actually more of a not doing that allows them to kind of unravel. Um, there's this beautiful analogy which I heard once, which is basically like when we start meditating, it's like our mind and our thoughts, they are like a rope. And so the rope is always super tied up and lots of knots in it. When we start meditating, we start to just unravel some of these knots. And after some practice, after some time of doing this, it almost becomes the default. So rather than our mind being like a rope, our mind starts to become like a snake. So every time the mind ties a knot into itself, the snake just kind of like unravels naturally. And deeper, eventually the mind becomes more like a empty house in which a thief and the thoughts are like thieves, which enter, they don't see anything to steal, and they leave again. So this is really a way that we can start relating to our thoughts, but step by step. Sometimes I feel that's the case. Sometimes, oh, my mind is like an empty house. Sometimes it really feels like a rope. And it's also about accepting both of those states of being. Great, thank you for the answers. And if nothing has changed, yeah, just invite you to keep practicing and notice. Maybe even what I just shared, maybe that helps a little bit to the direction that we're heading together. So if it feels like you're fighting or struggling in the meditations, it's much more a letting go, a letting things be as they are, and just gently coming back to the ground of the breathing. Great. So we're starting to understand more the body and the mind. And this is really what the key is, to see, firstly, to see body and mind. So we see our body, we see the breath, we see the other sensations in the body, and we see the movements of mind. The first step is always to start to see the things more. And some people say that, I notice way more that I'm thinking or something. That's great. That's the first step, because before we weren't even aware that we were thinking or lost in thought so much. Now we are starting to become aware of this. So often people feel, oh, I'm thinking more now that I'm meditating, but actually you're just starting to notice more that we are always thinking. Yes. So to just share my screen. So there's three things we're practicing during this course, and we have this sila, this morality, doing good, not doing harm, the precepts that we are hopefully trying to upkeep a little bit at least. And then we've been practicing the practice of samadhi or samatha meditation for the first few days, where we're just having one focus object and we repeatedly come back to that focus of the breath. And we choose the breath because we want to start sensitizing ourselves not to any ideas or visualizations or mantras. We want to sensitize our attention towards the actual sensations which are happening in our experience. And we do this through the breath. So some of you might have noticed that you started picking up more detail in the sensations. Or maybe now you can differentiate the sensations inside the nostril, on the upper lip, or maybe now there's a feeling of hot, a feeling of cold, or maybe even some finer details. And this is the preparation. So this is the preparation for the practice of Vipassana meditation. And so samadhi, the primary objective is just to collect and calm the mind into one pointedness and to unify the mind and bring it into a concentrated state. But that's just kind of our tool. So we have this microscope now, and we're developing the clarity and the high definition of our microscope. But now we want to direct that microscope or that vision that we've cultivated into the practice of Vipassana. And in Vipassana, the goal is actually not to be calm or peaceful in this moment. The goal is just to cultivate a wisdom and an understanding of the way things work, to cultivate the understanding of, remembering the analogy of the car, to start understanding how this thing that we all have, this body, this mind, which is sometimes very complicated, how it works, so that we can start to know how to use it better in our lives, so that we can do the things that we want to and stay away from the things that maybe that bring us suffering. Vipassana. So what is Vipassana exactly? Vipassana is the technique which was given to us by Gautama the Buddha about 2,500 years ago. Buddha lived in northern India, and he taught many different techniques and had many different things in his lifetime, which he taught, but Vipassana is supposedly the most direct way of gaining realization or liberation or freedom from suffering. And this is really what the Buddha taught, to be free from suffering. So the word Vipassana, it just means to see in a special way. So the prefix V means seeing or special, and Passana means to see. And today we commonly refer to this type of awareness as mindfulness, or you have to be careful with the word mindfulness, that often gets thrown around a lot and used a lot. But mindfulness is really a quite specific technique, or rather it's a quite specific way of looking at your experience, or you could also call it a way of relating to experience, with the goal of wisdom or understanding of how body and mind is working. So this is what we're going to practice for the rest of the course. There's two questions which are utmost importance on this journey, and these are kind of like guiding questions which you can ask yourself. And it's essentially like, what do you want? So what are your desires? What are you working towards? What is your aspiration? and what are the things that make you suffer. So we all have our sources of suffering. For some of us, it's more things in the body and how we relate to that. For some of us, more interpersonal relationships. Some of us, it's the way we relate to work, etc., etc. And just noticing these sources of suffering and what exactly happens in the body and in the mind when the suffering comes is very important for us to investigate, because that's where we start to see how suffering starts to arise in the mind, how the unpleasant states of mind happen, how they manifest in the body, how we react to them with craving, with aversion, and how we tend to perpetuate them until something else distracts us, and then we may be, or we look for stuff on the outside which helps us to calm down, etc. But actually, it's all happening here in body and in mind. Yeah, maybe actually just to share, just name one thing that makes you suffer. I'm curious. And suffering doesn't have to be huge suffering like end of the world, I'm dying suffering, but suffering can be as subtle as feeling a little bit annoyed, or feeling something bothers you a little bit. What bothers you? If you feel like sharing in the chat, you don't have to share if you don't. The arguments with family members, yes, can create a lot of, especially with the people that are more close to us, our family members. There's a long history, long relationship, and often the arguments that we have in the moment, they bring up so much of stuff from the past, and so much reactivity is already stored in us, and we overreact to the things that happen in the moment. Yeah, financial stress for sure. When there's a lot of worry, anxiety, especially around finances, something so key to the survival. And it's also important here to distinguish between, for sure we need money, for sure we need money to survive, but how much we actually need to suffer in response to maybe not having enough money, or how much of that suffering is extra. So can we take away a lot of the worries that we have and still act in this world? Still, okay, I need to make ends meet, I need to work. Let's think about how we make money, etc. But how much of the suffering is basically unnecessary? So this is an interesting thing to investigate and look at. Yeah. Okay. So our normal way of relating to this world is, okay, here's me, I'm Raimar, and I interact with the different things in my life. I interact with people, with the environment, with the work, with the things around me, and this is how I relate. Here's me, and there's kind of a clear boundary of interact with the world. And in a very basic way, when I feel unhappy, it's the fault of something in the world, and when I feel unhappy, it's the fault of something in the world. So we put the reasons out there, and sometimes we put the reasons also here. This solid thing that I call me, sometimes it's this fault. For example, like if I blame myself, etc., it's either that the fault of that, the world, or it's the fault of this, me. But Vipassana tries to change this a little bit, change this view a little bit, not theoretically, not through understanding, but by the way we pay attention to our experience. So you started realizing that in the meditation, when you sit, actually it's not the world that makes me suffer, it's just my mind and the body. So rather than, for sure there's the external world out here, but that world interacts with this body and this mind. And actually most of the things that we experience, they happen because the body interacts with the mind and the mind interacts with the body. And these two often, they're also kind of one and the same thing, but they are constantly influencing and reacting to each other. So what's an example of this? For example, you were in the meditation, and you start feeling some physical pain, some discomfort in the back or in the knee. And then the thoughts come related to that. Oh, maybe I should move. Oh, I should force myself to stay longer. Let's continue. And then maybe the body starts to hurt actually more, or you start also feeling some restlessness, some impatience, some fidgeting in the body. And then the mind comes again, and these kind of like the two ricocheting off each other. What initially was just some sensation inside the body. And when we start to see this process and start to understand this process, we can start to see it earlier. So the moment the sensation arises in the body, here's this feeling of discomfort. If I can clearly observe this moment, the chain reaction that causes the suffering tends to be reduced a lot, or actually, if the observation is very clear, doesn't even happen. So it can just be the present moment. Now there's this sensation, disappear. Now there's some thought in the mind, disappear. Now there's fidgeting, and then observing and disappears. That doesn't mean the fidgeting never comes again, but we deal with it moment to moment. So rather than it being this huge big thing of I can't do this and it's my fault, or it's the fault of something out there, we just deal with things moment to moment, and everything is just body and mind, body and mind. So here is also another question for you. Do you ever get overwhelmed and lose clarity of what you're doing, and act or react in ways that you regret? So do you face these situations where you feel very emotional, very crazy or something, and then you kind of like act out of this response? Maybe you tend to hide, go into victimization, or you explode or do something which you then later like, actually that wasn't really in line with the way I want to live my life. Does that happen sometimes, a little bit, all the time? And maybe just write that in the chat from 1 to 5. Meanwhile, I can drink a little bit of tea. A 4, a 3, 4.5, a 5. Anyone else? Okay. So what is happening in these moments? In these moments, we lose our ability to see clearly. So remember that Vipassana is all about this special way of looking, which looks clearly at what experience is and the experience of mind and body. So when we lose our awareness, we cannot separate body and mind. But if we can clearly see what's happening in our experience when we start to get triggered, that almost like prevents that state from perpetuating. So we're catching it earlier. So Vipassana essentially has 2 components. And the first component of the Vipassana practice is the awareness. So this is basically building our level of clarity and our level of concentration. So you've already started to do this with the breath. You focus here, your ability to stay on this task of focusing, of developing, and your ability to pick up more detail in this sensation starts to increase as well. And your ability to start noticing the thoughts also. So not just what you are focusing on here, but also kind of in the background. You notice when a thought comes, or maybe you get caught in a thought, but you're starting to notice more this habit of being caught in a thought, and whenever you notice it, you just come back. You're developing this clarity and concentration. And the other piece, which also you've already started developing, is equanimity. So not to react, not to go into worry, anxiety, not to go into pressuring yourself, forcing yourself, not trying to change anything, just gently coming back and not trying to maintain. If something is really good, we don't hold on to it because we want to make it better. We just deal with things moment to moment, even if they are really good. And we're not trying to create anything. So this is not so much, this is more like an inner attitude or inner stance that we hold. And sometimes we react. Sometimes there is unpleasantness, sometimes there is impatience. That doesn't mean we're doing it wrong, but we can relate to this impatience with the same equanimity. We're just, there's impatience happening. We're just aware. Now I'm being hard on myself again. Just aware, there's this thought of being hard on myself. And kind of like, rather than being stuck in it, okay, here's the thing of being hard on myself and I'm at fault or someone else is at fault. By just seeing it with equanimity, we create more space around it and see that it's that it's just an experience and it passes always. So just to illustrate equanimity a bit more physically, I invite you to kind of like clench your fists. So hold up your hands in front of you and just clench your fists. And then just repeat in your head, no, 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 no. And then relax your hands, open them, and just say yes, 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 yes. So equanimity is a little bit more like this relaxation of the doing. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to open our hands like this. We just relax the squeezing of the hand and we say yes. So this is what you can do in your meditation when the difficult things happen. Just relax and say yes, and yes to whatever it is. You can also replace the word equanimity with acceptance or surrendering or allowing. All these words, they're essentially different ways of saying the same thing. So we are really just aware of what's happening. So the body. This technique, if you already did the morning meditation today, the Vipassana technique that we are using for this course is not the only Vipassana technique. Important to say that, but it's a very effective one because it starts with the body, and the body is kind of the easiest place to create mindfulness. So what we are doing in the next few days is we're scanning the body. We start at the top of the head and we scan down the shoulders, the hands, etc. We scan, we feel the entire body, and then we go up again. And some parts you'll be more sensitive, some parts will be less sensitive, some parts you won't be able to feel at all maybe at this point. But just try to feel anything that's happening there. So even the feeling of just sitting on your butt, that is also a feeling, a sensation. We don't have to look for anything special or spiritual or godly or mystical or energy or anything like this, but just really what you are feeling. If you know that you are sitting, you know that you are sitting, and there's a feeling of sitting. It's not complicated. It's not. So, for example, you can just raise your arm here. And how do you know you're raising your arm? There's some feeling of raising your arm and lowering the arm. So you can try this. Try raising and lowering your arm. So where do you feel raising your arm? Maybe here, in the shoulders more. So this is also a sensation. So anything that's appearing in the body is a sensation. It doesn't have to be something special. Or maybe you can feel the feeling of air blowing past your arm. Anything is a sensation. It doesn't have to be complicated or special. And what we're doing here, we're training ourselves to just be with the sensations of the body with a sense of more awareness. So firstly, the first step of just being aware of body sensation, and then being able to distinguish and see them more clearly. Almost like we're using, first we have a camera which is kind of in these YouTube videos which are just extremely pixelated and you can't see anything, and it's like 1 frame per second. So maybe this is how our awareness is in the beginning of our body, and we can now I know I'm standing, and now I know I'm walking, something very basic. But as we start to train ourselves to scan our body and create more feeling of the body, more sensitivity, we start to see more. Now I can see in 360 pixels, now maybe in standard detail, now in high detail. And we also see more frames per second, and the picture of the body becomes clearer. And then in the daily life, So the reason why body awareness is important, because the things that trigger us, they cause feelings in the body. So when we are, yeah, actually, let me ask you, did you notice anything inside in the way your body felt when you, or in the way your breathing was when you were more anxious, more restless, more in an uncomfortable state versus when you were more peaceful and relaxed? Did you notice any feelings inside your body or inside how your breathing changed? And what was there? You can just write in the chat. And then you can just say maybe what you felt in the body or in the breath. Something like, my breath was more shallow, or Diana, what does restlessness feel like? Where did you feel it? Exactly. So physical heaviness in the chest when you're sad. Punam noticed. Maria noticed there was muscle tone, there was clenching in the jaw, facial muscles, the breathing rate changed, the depth changed. Wow, right. Noticing a lot of things. So the body and the mind are very interrelated, and the states of mind can be felt inside the body. So when you have more sensitivity, you'll be able to pick up this more the tension, the breathing rate, the heaviness, maybe contraction. Often when it's unpleasant, when it's pleasant, it's more expansive, more relaxed, usually. And we are developing a sensitivity for this. And whenever then in the daily life, something contracts, something, etc., we can just apply this way of viewing, of seeing it clearly with equanimity to the sensation inside, that appears inside the body. And this helps not to react to the things, because usually we're not reacting to the thing on the outside. We actually, the thing on the outside triggers something inside our mind body. Mind interprets in a certain way. Body feels some sensation. Mind reacts to the sensation with disliking, with not wanting it. Body starts sweating more, getting more tense. Mind says, oh, we need to do something about this. Body is getting ready. The nervous system is getting mobilized. Your heart rate goes up. Your breathing gets more shallow, intense, and then maybe we lash out or something, or maybe we hide, we run away, when actually there's a different optimal response. And when we start to notice this in the first moment that this discomfort arises, or maybe earlier on than before, we can start to change the way we act just by being aware. Someone's said this and this to me. Usually then I feel this explosion of energy inside my body or something, and just by feeling it, because I train myself to be just aware and equanimous, maybe I'm still like excited or angry, but now I can I have a bit more space. There's a pause, there's awareness, there's choice now. Okay, I can still say something, but I can also let it go, or maybe establish a boundary, or whatever needs to be done. So it's not about just becoming a zombie and okay, I just meditate and aware of everything and I don't act. No, it's about having the awareness and then being able to act more rather than just react to the world. Okay, that was a lot of talking. So let us take a moment just to close down the eyes. Even if you're watching the recording, this is always helpful just to close the eyes and let's feel our bodies for a second, or just allow, rather than kind of trying to feel the body, just allow the body to come into focus naturally. So receiving whatever the body is doing, You can feel maybe the floor, sensation in the feet, maybe the feeling of sitting. Maybe you notice that where your hands are resting and the feeling of your hands and the weight of your arms. And just relax a little bit the jaw, the face. Nothing we have to do, just allowing the body to soften in its own time. So today we learned about we're transitioning from concentration, from calm meditation, which develops calm and concentration, towards Vipassana, which is more a way of seeing clearly. So rather than the goal being calm, the goal is wisdom and understanding, deep intuitive understanding. Vipassana means to see in a special way, or see through, or see clearly. And it's important to know that, to investigate what makes you suffer in the world and what are the things that you want, and to start to investigate what makes you suffer. Our usual way of viewing as our experience is, here's me and here's the world, and usually when we suffer, it's either the fault of me or it's the fault of the world, something in the world. But what this way of looking gets us to do is just to relate a little bit differently to experience. So there's definitely the world out there, but there's also body and there's mind. And actually, all we experience is just body and mind. And body and mind are constantly influencing each other. And by creating awareness of body, and through that also awareness of mind, and training ourselves to be in equanimity, or to just be aware, not to need to try and change, to maintain, or create anything. We just allow this deep-rooted desire to change things and to always fix things to slowly soften. So just to say yes to whatever is, to allow, to surrender. And this is why we cultivate this mindfulness, or this way of looking with the body first. The body is very important. On the body, we can observe directly all the different mind-body phenomena, the emotions, the discomforts, unpleasant things, also the pleasant things, the joy, the happiness, the sadness, the anger. It's all in the body, and you will be able to feel it on the body. So we just notice these things earlier. Okay. And you can open up the eyes again. So we have some time for any questions. Yeah, about anything I just said, or about the Vipassana technique itself. I can also go through some of the things from WhatsApp that people were reporting over the last 24 hours.
So, Raima, thank you. You mentioned the term samadhi, and then you also mentioned samatha. Are they the same thing?
It depends who you ask.
So, because you mentioned both the terms,
yes.
so I just wondered if I'd lost something.
Yes. So samatha means tranquility or calm.
Yeah.
And samadhi literally means to collect or to gather the mind. So these two terms are often used interchangeably, because collecting the mind, and we do it in meditation by collecting the mind, which is very scattered, monkey mind, onto the one meditation object over and over again. And over time, the mind becomes more collected, more unified, and that produces the state of calm or peacefulness. And so some people use the term samatha meditation, some use samadhi meditation, but also it depends a bit on the tradition. For example, like the yogic traditions, they use samadhi as certain states of concentration or states of absorption.
Mhm.
So you have like different levels of samadhi that you reach. Samatha meditation is also used in the Tibetan Buddhist traditions, and there it can be, yeah, it's also a specific practice. So the way I use it here, I mean them quite interchangeable, like they're just this process of unifying, concentrating the mind, but also depending on who you ask in the tradition, etc., they will have slightly different meanings and people use them in different ways. Thank you for the clarification. What else is there?
I can ask another question.
Go ahead.
It's sometimes during meditation when, say, if I'm really able to focus on the breathing for a while, or like yesterday, we were like focusing on the body, different sensations of the, there's a real sense of, and it doesn't happen a lot, but when it does happen, a real sense of as though there's real calm and almost as though there's a light. So it's very, very peaceful and very quiet. And that's really enjoyable. It's lovely. You almost think, oh, I wish I could be like this forever. Uh, but then part of me thinks there's a sense of unease in me that shouldn't be my aim. I shouldn't, because that itself is a big desire and attachment. That,
Yes,
oh, I
exactly.
want this wonderful, peaceful state.
Exactly. Great you're noticing this. Yes. So this is the difference between samatha meditation and vipassana meditation. Samatha is about creating these states of calm, of peace, through concentration. And vipassana is about being okay with whatever state is. So whether it's peaceful, whether it's not peaceful, whether it's unpleasant, pleasant, whatever emotion, whatever thought, it's actually being okay with any of it. And it's nothing wrong when we do go into states of peacefulness, and naturally we experience them more as we get concentrated. The states of peacefulness come, and then they go. And this is the important thing. And vipassana is what we notice in vipassana is more the way things always change, impermanence, the way the non-selfness, the anatta, the sense that actually the more I try to control this, the actually less feeling of control I have. I can momentarily influence states of peace, etc., but ultimately I don't have control. It's like waves, it's like the weather. I can it comes and goes. Sometimes we can create sometimes the peace gets created, sometimes it goes again. And the less we take ownership, like, oh, today I could do peace because I'm awesome and great. Actually, then if I personify this thing, then the next time there's no peace, then I will be very hard on myself. Oh, why can't I do it today? It's because this and that and that. So rather just allowing it to be more non-self, more, now it's here and tomorrow is not here, that's okay. And so there's the impermanence, there's non-self, and there's the suffering. So the more we cling, the more we hold on to this peace that comes and then goes always, and the more we push away this unpleasant thing, which also goes, which comes and goes, the more this creates the feeling of struggling or resistance or suffering, or struggling against life. So actually we can allow things more to flow, like waves that come. Today is the wave of sadness, that's okay. Today is the wave of happiness, that's okay. And actually more and more, just through that, we allow more letting go, more space, and naturally peace is the more default state of mind. But we don't have to create peace, it comes just through the awareness, just through the equanimity. Yeah.
Thank you.
Beautiful question. Thank you. Good. So maybe on a more practical level, just to kind of go through some of these things that were said in the chat. The thoughts that sneak in. How do I deal with strong emotions was a question. Sometimes my partner triggers me right before sessions. I try to remain calm, realizing impermanence, accept the anger is present, and do not push it away. Yes, and you can also actively investigate what is this feeling of anger, especially inside the body. So we're doing body scanning, we're sensitizing ourselves. What is anger is quite an abstract thing, but what we want to do is we have a tool now to investigate and look at anger more directly. So where's anger inside the body? There will be some sensations in the body. Maybe it's a contraction, maybe it's a tightening. You just feel this, but we don't need to change it. And we just allow ourselves to be with the state of anger and notice that it also changes. The anger now is not the same anger as 2 seconds later. It's changing. So we need more clear awareness so that we can notice this change. And you say also realizing impermanence. Impermanence is nice to know the idea and the concept of impermanence, but impermanence is also something that we understand more intuitively the more we practice. The more we start to see that things change, the more we can understand and use that intuitively rather than needing to think, this thing is also impermanent. That's useful in the beginning also, but you want to just realize it through the observation, through mindfulness, not through thinking. Boredom. So boredom can happen. And boredom is usually when we don't really look closely at what's happening. When we don't really look closely, things are the same, and then boredom happens. So, for example, looking at some tree in your backyard. So now I'm surrounded by trees. If I don't really look closely in this tree, this is the tree. I see this tree every day. I just keep walking, and I'm not particularly interested. I'm bored of this tree. So it tends to happen when we don't really look close. But if I really take the time to look closely at this and be interested and curious about this tree, I will always notice something new. And actually the tree is changing in every moment. The tree is changing every day. And it's the same thing with our emotions, with our thoughts, with the phenomena that we say, this is just another thing of that. It's the same thing. But we look closely, it's always different. And the more closely the more we can get interested and curious actually about this phenomena, that's these different phenomena that occur in mind and body. So this kind of curiosity to look is also something that's quite helpful.
Raymar, I had a question, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it's a bit of a strange question, but something that I've noticed over time is sort of if I'm staying present with anxiety or fear, like a lot of the motivation for action sort of goes away, and then I'm just looking at my own lack of action at certain things, and I'm just wondering if like, am I messing up certain things when, like then that fear comes in, that should I be taking action, and like all of that. So I'm just I guess that sort of interaction between like practice and like real life things are sort of confusing me a bit.
Yeah, this is a great question. This is when our mindfulness is not strong enough that when we observe the thing, it doesn't bother us. When there's some feeling, what can happen is the nervous system goes more into this kind of freeze response, almost like a protection, like things are there, we are kind of observing them, but we tend to go more into like maybe become a bit helpless, or we feel that things are hopeless, or there's no action, we don't feel inspired to do anything about it, or it's almost like it's also overwhelming and nervous system shuts down a bit. So what a trick which I use, which is the Vipassana way, is just to look at that and look at the disliking of that, etc. But something which helps along the way is also just to sometimes just to do something, just to kind of get the nervous system out of the this freeze response just to act. And sometimes that means like doing something in the body, so just opening the body and maybe like jumping a bit and yelling or something like this can help to get out of that freeze, that like protection response. This isn't Vipassana, by the way. This is more like general, more like nervous system regulation, and sometimes that can help, or to get to move the body a little bit, and then we can get out of this freeze response, and then we can observe often a bit more clearly. But importantly, to use both, to use the mindfulness and awareness, and then we can use kind of different tricks to work with the state, but always with mindfulness, always with awareness, never just blindly doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. It also makes sense that it's freeze. Yeah, and shaking it out also makes sense.
Yeah, it tends to be, when we get overwhelmed, it tends to be either fight or flight or freeze. And those states of the nervous system aren't bad states. We can actually learn how to use a more active nervous system. Like, for example, I'm in danger and someone's shouting at me or something like this, and I need to act. I can allow myself to act and actually maybe to fight or to run or to do something strong. But I do it with an awareness, with a sense of compassion for myself, for others. And it's the same also when I go more into this kind of like freeze response. Sometimes naturally when we're tired, when we're sick, etc., we go more into this. We're not so capable of acting, etc., but we can allow it to be, this is for healing, for regeneration. And it's not kind of like this sense of hopelessness or not being able to act or not having any options, etc., that tends to happen in this freeze response. There can be more space around it with practice, with awareness. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We went a little bit off track of Vipassana, but I think it's also useful. Maybe that touches on a nice thing. It's like, actually I found that we can use mindfulness is almost like the base. The awareness, the equanimity is the base for everything. But we can use different things. We can use tools from psychology, from therapy, from even martial arts, or nonviolent communication. All these things, they help us for sure to put that also into action, like the awareness, etc. alone, plus like how we want to act, and then we can use other stuff as well. And yeah. Okay. So maybe we end there. Thank you so much for joining in. We had a few less live people, but yeah, during the week usually people working and stuff, so completely understandable. So thank you also if you're watching the recording. We have 6 more days of working together, and I hope you can continue with the meditations. And if you missed some, no problem. Just start again where you are. We don't have to be perfect. Continue to be kind to yourself, patient, and some people find the body scanning more easy than the anapanasati. Sometimes people find it more difficult. Depends a little bit on you, but there's definitely a lot to learn with the body. And you can always go back a little bit to the breathing if it's too difficult to do body scan. Just kind of sharpen up awareness again, and then again go to the body. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Prima. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.